Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast, where we're here to help you be that lawyer, someone who's confident, organized, and a skilled rainmaker. This is happening every day, twice a week. Every day. It's not every day. I mean, you can listen to it every day. There's 400 plus episodes, Matt, but it's twice a week if you're new to listening to the show or have already heard the others. But hey, buddy, how's it going?
It's good, Steve. It's great to see you again. Obviously, we've known each other for quite a few years. Good to be back connecting and excited to have this chat.
Yeah, me too. This is going to be a really interesting and different exercise than some of the other podcasts we've done. And I'm not going to give any spoilers yet because we're gonna do it soon enough. But we do love to start with our quote of the show, and I want to hear why this one is your sort of favorite. And we've all heard this our whole lives, but I want to hear your take. It's an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Good old Ben Franklin there.
Yeah, it's to your point. I mean, I've heard it since I was a young boy. Like a lot of things I heard when I was a young man, you hear it, you're like, oh, that sounds clever. Or, when you get older, you start to understand the meaning behind it. And when you've experienced the pain of curing something that could have been prevented, I think that's where you really start to feel like, oh, wow, this Ben Franklin guy had some pretty good thoughts. It's something that my team and I know we're going to chat a little bit more about this later, so I won't get too deep into it, but it's something my team and I at Infusion, my legal team, are very focused on this year specifically, which is like, look, some things happen. You've got to cure them. You've got to clean up messes, right? You got to grab the mop and get to work. But when you see those things happening repeatedly, you got to start thinking about how do you prevent that in the first place, right? Because it's a lot easier to solve it once up front than to clean it up 100 times. So to me, that quote, like many great quotes, really encapsulates that concept very easily. I think for anybody, whether it's on my team, the business stakeholders that we work with, it's a good way to have a conversation about a concept. And so, yeah, that's one of the quotes that I dust off and use quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think the idea of risk and versus consequence, right? I mean, you can have a lawyer that helps you to avoid risk and avoid consequences. I mean, that helps avoid risk and consequences versus dealing with the outcome and the fallout of not preventing and not doing and taking care of things. And again, this could be home maintenance. This could be a legal issue. This could be health, right? We're dealing with a very unhealthy population, and it seems like there's very little being done to sort of like cut off the processed foods or the things that are really dragging us down. And so now they're coming up with pills and solutions that are definitely going to have some adverse side effects because we can't figure out the front end of it.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like we're similar in this way. I'm a big user of analogies. I think for lawyers, which I know you spend so much of your time with, the law is very complex, and a lot of the day-to-day conversations I have about the law are with non-lawyers. And so I use analogies all the time. And so hearing you talk about, home maintenance or health, I've used those analogies. Obviously the goal is always, take your vitamins, right? Get a good amount of sleep, like exercise. But inevitably, whether it's genetics or something, there's going to be something like a diabetes or a cancer, right, that you have to clean up or deal with or treat. And, good prevention doesn't eradicate all risk, obviously, but what it does is it minimizes, I think, unnecessary risk.
Yeah.
So, certain risk is opportunity, right? You see risk and you're like, hey, we're going to go down this path as a business or as a human being, right? And there's going to be some risk in there. But if you stop and you kind of assess that up front, and you think, hey, how should I dress for this journey? What do I need to bring with me in case things get, that to me is about just being thoughtful and not just kind of rushing down the road and then dealing with things as they come. I think some companies do that depending on where they are in their growth cycle. Infusion, the company I'm with, we went public 2.5 years ago, and I was with the company as a in-house lawyer, as a deputy general counsel before we went public. And obviously now I'm the general counsel as we are public. We're two very different companies, right? Infusion is still what it says on our masthead and on our website. But when you're a private company and your focus is on, just growth and evolving your product versus a public company where you're dealing with regulatory bodies and things like that and oversight and filings, it's very different. And so when you're growing quickly and you need to be nimble, you have a little bit more temperament and a little bit more of an appetite for risk. Whereas when you become public, you still have to take risks to grow and to perform. but you have to be more thoughtful and deliberate about the process you have around that. So,
Yeah.
I think right now this focus on prevention for me as a general counsel and my team, it wouldn't have been the right fit for this company 3 years ago, but it feels like the perfect time for it right now.
Yeah. And so you guys are all picking up on the fact that Matt is a general counsel. I don't have many, maybe you might be the first general counsel I've had on the show. Matt
Honored.
Campobasso, the GC of Infusion, just so you guys know who we're dealing with here. And the reason other than you're an awesome guy and I, we had a chance to work together and you ended up going in-house, which is phenomenal. But I think I want to get your background because I know there was some, transitions that happened in your life that led you to where you are today. So let's go there. And then I have like a bunch of questions I want to hit you up with to kind of feather out this whole in-house private practice question that many lawyers have.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think when I was 15, I decided to go to law school. I'm just kidding, by the way. I'm not going to go into all that detail.
A lot of people say that. One of my
your
clients
listeners
says
don't
she
care about that.
became a divorce attorney when she helped her parents divorce at like 8 years old or something.
Oh,
She's
wow.
like, you two need a divorce. She's like,
right. Well, good
road
for
was
her to
laid.
have that. Exactly. Yeah. For me, not so much.
Okay.
I've been to a degree figuring it out as I go, but I always knew the law was interesting to me. I like helping people. I like thinking about complex problems. I graduated from law school about 18 years ago, and I did 2 years as a criminal prosecutor in Illinois state courts and out in McHenry County. I loved it, tried a lot of cases, made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of lessons. Then I transitioned to a very traditional law firm path, a law firm by the name of Freeborn and Peters, which is where I was, Steve, when you and I first had a chance to work together. I was there for 11 years. I was I think what they called me was a complex civil litigator. I litigated on both sides, plaintiff and defense, everything from insurance disputes to real estate, shareholders, executive disputes, all that stuff. It was incredible. I mean, in those 11 years, I feel like I learned the things that have made me successful now. I learned from all the lawyers that I worked with there. There's a version of my career where I stay at a law firm and I just kind of, punch the clock every day and I'm successful. But something that kept me moving and kept me thinking about, hey, what else is out there, was this feeling of, as a litigator, and even as an outside lawyer who's not a litigator, you only get involved when your client picks up the phone, and you have no control over that, right? You can maintain open communication with your client. You can say, hey, I'm here for you. But until they have a need that's defined and they're like, hey, I'm feeling pain, who do I call? Hopefully they call you. But until that point, you don't have a ton of visibility into the day-to-day of what's going on. So the ability to intervene early or be proactive is really not there. And if it is there, depending on, how close of a relationship you have with a GC or an in-house team, it's not nearly as effective as it is when you're on the other side and you are that in-house lawyer. So, near the end of my law firm tenure, like I said, I did about 11 years as an associate and then as a partner. I just felt like I was getting brought in too late. And I just thought, hey, I always, to go back to my point about analogies, I always felt like, even the best firefighter, they get called to a house that's on fire. Even if you're great at what you do and you put that fire out faster than anybody else, there's damage, right? There's damage. Things are burned. Things have to be replaced, smoke damage. And I always just felt like, yeah, that's the heroic thing, like putting out fires. I'd rather prevent fires in the first place because then the firefighter doesn't get called, but nobody throws a parade for the guy who installs the electrical in the walls, right? He just does his job.
The sprinkler systems, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So, but to me, personally speaking, I just thought, like I would love to get involved in these decisions earlier, because I used to say to my clients, we'd have a 2-year piece of very heavy litigation. It's expensive. It's unpredictable. Everybody's upset. And even if we win, the clients are like, this was the worst experience of my life. And I'm like, personally, I'm like, wow, okay, well, we won. And that's what you're saying. I can't even imagine what the other guys are saying.
Yeah.
And I just thought and I would say to my clients, I would say, you know what? Hey, do me a favor next time. Like, if you would have called me 6 months earlier, you could have saved $500,000 and a lot of headaches. And they would say, inevitably, absolutely, next time. Did they? Almost never. Yeah. And so I realized eventually, for me to get to the point where I'm working on these sorts of things early, I probably need to move in-house. And so I made the tough decision in 2018 to leave Freeborn and Peters. And I went to a company called Elevate. I was there for about 1.5 years. That's where I got my first taste of true in-house work. And I was doing, more surgical things that related to litigation because that's what my background was. But immediately I felt like, hey, this idea that I had this proof of concept was like proven. And I was like, this is it. Like, this is what I need to be doing. And so I went from Elevate after about a year and a half to a small company based in Chicago called Truqua. I was there for 6 months. I was right as COVID was beginning. I thought at the start of that, hey, this is where I'm going to retire. The gentleman that owned the company had other ideas, not about me specifically, but they wanted to, they were being pursued by IBM, and IBM bought them. I had an opportunity to go to IBM, and it wasn't unappealing, but I just said, you know what, before I make another move, I want to think about what's out there. And, in summer of 2020 is when I learned about Infusion. And, when I first kind of kicked the tires on the company, what I saw was this like rapid growth trajectory. And I went in as the third lawyer. They were private. There was rumblings, in my interviews about, hey, we may go public at some point. And I just thought, you know what? This is one of those unique opportunities where there's like kind of a rocket ship here, and I can get on and I can just learn as I go. And yeah, I mean, 3.5 years later, here I am. Like I said, I was the third lawyer. Now I'm one of 9. I've got an incredible team. I'm the general counsel, and it's a very exciting job. And I think to kind of put a bow around that, the thing that I was looking for in my law firm days, which was the ability to influence decisions early. I have, if not 100 times a day, dozens of times a day. I'm in conversations with our board, with our executive team, with my team. And I'm seeing these things, which I know if untreated or treated improperly, turn into litigation. And so I have the ability to kind of put my hand in there and collaborate and say, hey, you know what? Like, you want to get from A to B. If we go this way, we're going to bump into some things. Let's go this way. It's a little bit longer of a path, but we're going to sidestep some things that might otherwise get us into trouble. And so I'm happy to say, relieved, I think is maybe the better word, relieved that the idea that I had, 7 years ago, that, hey, going in-house might get me closer to the sort of work I want to be doing on a daily basis, it has proven out. And so, I'm loving it.
But it's for some lawyers, there's like this fantasy about in-house and how great it is, and everything that you've just shared is not fantasy. It's happening in real time for you. However, they're not all that way, right? So I want to take a moment to just look at the pros and cons of private practice and in-house jobs, and then I want to lead that into, how do we approach in-house folks? Because for the people that are listening to the show, which is primarily people in private practice, getting in front of a GC and locking up a new company through the GC is that's the dream of a private practice attorney. So let's start with sort of your take on pro, and you may have to pull your job out of it a little bit because they're not all that again, rainbows and butterflies and pots of gold. But how do you see, because you've done both now, the pros and cons of each?
Yeah, I think there's tons of pros for both, right? And the cons, I think, are very specific, Steve. As a law firm attorney, you're getting the opportunity to work with a lot of different types of companies, right? For me, I work for Infusion, and our business is my business, right? Mm-hmm. When I was a law firm practitioner, like I said earlier, I was doing, dozens of cases a year, all over the map from a substance perspective. And I think at that point in my career, that was a significant pro, because I was realizing, hey, different situations require different tools. And some of those I didn't have in my toolbox, or some weren't as sharp as I wish they had been. And so I learned a ton. I think another pro of being at a law firm is, the firm I was with was 150 lawyers, some of the best lawyers I've ever worked with. And I almost felt like a kid in a candy shop when I started there, because I was like, there's so many people here who are each good at specific things. And I feel like if you have like the right mindset and you're willing to learn, and steal is probably not the right word, but borrow from people, it's such an incredible opportunity, right? Like if you were to go to a company, like if I had come to Infusion and been one of 3 lawyers right out of law school, there's 2 lawyers I would be learning from. And, maybe I learned some things, but having, 100 lawyers plus and saying, hey, this person is an incredible writer, and this woman goes to court and no one is more prepared, or the way this guy picks a jury. And that's what I had the benefit of for like 11 years. Yeah.
But then on top of that, Matt, you were saying like all the different companies that you get to work with and all the different types of law that you get to practice, even if you're a specific type of litigator or transactional, right? So you're getting it from both sides. You're getting it from all the different matters that happen, and then you're getting it from inside with all the attorneys you get to learn from. So I think that's
exactly.
Yeah, that's
it's exposure.
That's pretty.
It's
pretty
broad
good.
exposure. Yeah, it was wonderful. I mean, again, it's easy to say this because my career has been one journey, but like, I don't know how I end up where I am now and capable of doing what I'm doing, if not for that time. And like I said, there's a version of my life where I stay in the law firm model and I do that until I retire, and I'm very happy. And I come out of that a great lawyer. To me, what I think, so those, I guess, to answer your question, those are the pros.
Yeah, but I want to give one more pro, and let's stay on private practice for another few minutes. But one more pro I want to give is that, and this is not a plug for my services, but it's something that every lawyer knows, and especially the lawyers listening to this show, that if you're just a service partner, that's not the pro. The pro is when you can develop the $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $4 million books of business and have the power, have the control, and have your own clients to work on. That's a huge advantage on so many levels as a pro to stay in private practice. And we're not, so I just want to add that pro before we move to the cons, which, we can start off with the latter, which is staying a service partner, and you have 10 companies that you're doing matters on. So you have 10 bosses in the companies that you're working for, the GCs and CEOs telling you what to do, and you're getting fed that work by 5 lawyers. So now you have 5 lawyer bosses. So you have 10, 15 bosses, essentially, not including your internal team. So starting off with that con in private practice is a kind of a major one.
Yeah, it's tough because you're answering to a lot of people, and the only person who's really cognizant of like what your resource bandwidth is you. And so, depending on your personality, and a lot of lawyers are very type A, you want to keep everybody happy all the time. It can be definitely a strain, and it can affect like work-life balance. To your point, if you're able to build that book of business and you're able to say, hey, I've got 1, 2, 3 clients that I am their go-to outside lawyer, and that yields $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year in revenue for the firm that you're with, like that's an incredible position to be in, right? And there are people I watched firsthand lawyers build that book of business. And, I think a lot of lawyers are kind of like, and I remember thinking this as a young lawyer, I'll just do good work. I'll keep my head down and clients will come to me. That's just not how the world works. Yeah, sometimes a client will fall in your lap, but that's the exception. I think to your, this is what you do, right? Like, this as well as anyone. You've got to go out there and be very mindful and deliberate about building that book of business and how do you market yourself. And not a lot of lawyers are very good at that. The ones that are truly like masters of the universe, right? Like they're the ones who are like, I've got 5 clients, I've got $8 million a year in revenue, I've got a team of 14 lawyers that support me and my clients. Like it's a very good position to be in, but it's the exception. And so, yeah, when you're on the other side of that equation and you're a service partner, there are some of the best lawyers I've ever met are service partners, and they're just, you go into their specific vertical and no one knows more than they do. But with that depth of knowledge and that expertise, if you don't have the other piece of that, which is, the money coming in under your name, it creates a very tenuous situation. So that's absolutely a con because, every lawyer at a law firm is out there looking for a whale. There's only so many whales in the ocean.
Yeah. I mean, and then, again, there's some lawyers working 60 hours a week. They're working weekends. They're on call all the time. So, there's a reason why there's a group of lawyers who are continually have that 1 foot in, 1 foot out, looking for that in-house role because they feel like it, the grass is going to be greener. And I think in some instances it definitely is, especially if they're not really motivated for business development. If that isn't something they have the any inclination for, interest in, it's never going to be their thing. But there is an issue there though, because maybe we're moving to the in-house side. I know that in-house jobs used to be 20, 30 year, commitments, right? You'd have your in-house job forever. I mean, how long do you think an in-house job lasts these days?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's probably somewhat contingent on like the maturity of the business, right? If you've got like let's call it a GE or, some sort of a manufacturing business or something that's been around for 50 years, I would say you probably tend to see those decade plus. For a lot of different types of companies, startups, technology, I would say shorter, right? You've got things changing, companies evolving quickly, their needs change. There's, in this day and age, mergers and acquisitions are, very prevalent. And so you get companies getting swooped up and there's redundancies. So I would say, yeah, I mean, it's in-house. Like I don't have any like hard numbers to point to, Steve, but I think I would say that, yeah, I've heard those stories, right? Where people are like, oh, I was an in-house lawyer that I I did corporate work for this company for 25 years. I hear those stories less and less. And when I do hear them, I mean, just by the nature of, age and length of profession, it's older attorneys. I've noticed there's a lot more, nomadic tendencies with younger lawyers. And by younger, I would say like, 50 and under.
Well, it's a bit of, there is some networking and some, business development going on in the sense that if you have an assistant GC working under you, they know you're not going anywhere. Matt's the bomb. He ain't going anywhere. He's going to run this company for the next 10 years. What's their incentive if they want to develop? They can't take your job necessarily. They could try, but they may say, hey, now I have enough experience working under Matt. I want to go take this experience and go try to be the top GC somewhere else, or maybe an assistant GC at a larger company. So I think there's positioning that's happening.
Yes.
But if a company gets bought, if a company merges, if the IBM, whatever, and then you're out. And if there isn't another role ready for you, like waiting for you, then what? Right? You're kind of an in-house with no book of business. What's that forecast?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I've thought about. I'll be honest, I don't think about it a ton.
Well, maybe you better start thinking about it.
I mean, that's a good,
CEO. Yeah. We're going to have a conversation about you. Not.
Yeah, no. But listen, I think you're absolutely right. Like any lawyer, the economy in the world, the job market has changed. To your point, my dad ran a company for 35 years and like he retired and that was it. And it's like, I've had more jobs at 45 than my dad had, at 70. And so things change, right? And there's a whole variety of factors. Sometimes it's forced through an acquisition or a sale. Sometimes it's through, I don't know, performance related issues, or people want to, they talk about moving from one role to another as a way to maximize earnings. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but the bottom line is, to your point, people are changing jobs now more rapidly than ever. To your point about, for me, I think there's two things I heard. Number one is kind of my, if you think about an AGC who reports to me, number one, my goal is, and I've said this to my team, maybe as recently as earlier this week, look, I don't have any sort of delusion that we're all going to retire from Infusion together someday. I mean, that would be lovely, but that's a storybook. My goal is to maximize their input at Infusion while they're here, but also to give them the opportunity to learn as much as possible. So in fact, like nothing would make me happier. I'm a big football fan. You hear about the Bill Parcells like tree of coaching, right? All those guys who were assistants under him, who now are head coaches or were head coaches, Bill Belichick and Rex Ryan. My dream would be in 10 years to look around and see 4 of my other 8 lawyers on my team or more being GCs at companies of varying sizes. Like that would be incredible, right? Yeah. That's success in my mind, because that means they're maximizing their growth. They feel engaged. So that's one piece of it. To your question about me specifically, yeah, if tomorrow I found out, hey, Infusion's getting bought, Matt, and thanks for everything, but this is where we leave you, I'd have to think long and hard about what that looks like, right? Do I go find a role that, how does that look? Do I go back to a law firm? To your point, I don't have a book of business. So what does that look like? Hopefully my value proposition as a general counsel opens some doors, but those doors aren't open until they're open. And so absolutely, to your point, I mean, you kind of got to pick a path, I think, at some point. And I know you wanted to hear a little bit about the pros of going in-house. I definitely had I had some business when I left the law firm practice, and I kind of was like, all right, well, I'm going to hand this off to some of my colleagues and I'm going to go do this. I hope this works, because if it doesn't, I've kind of given away this accumulated leverage that I had over time that added to my value proposition. Right. So yeah, do you want me to talk a little bit about like pros and cons of
I think we're going to have to do like 30 seconds, because I have a very important direction I want to go with this, and we're running out of time. I think we just got excited real quick. So give us a couple of, I think lawyers know some of the benefits of going in-house, and we just covered a con, but maybe just hit 2 real quick, and then I got a big question for you.
The 2 obvious ones to me are, number one, you have one client to know, right? Within that business, you have multiple clients, you have different teams and organizations, but you understand, if you're doing your job and you're paying attention and you have good communication, you understand the general direction that your client, the company, the stakeholders is moving at all times. And so I've said this for a long time, the best lawyers, the best way to protect their clients is to know their clients. And there's no better way to know your client from the inside. And to me, that's like the biggest thing. I know more about Infusion, obviously, than I knew about any of my clients as a law firm attorney. And it's allowing me to be very fluid and nimble and to react in real time. And sometimes time is of the essence. You don't have a week to think about an issue. You have an hour and you got to make a quick decision. So that's one big thing, is just knowledge of my client in Fusion. The other one is, I would say, diversity of experience. And so previously I mentioned, like, you have diversity of skill sets with lawyers at a law firm, you have diversity of clients that you're working for. Now, because I'm so close to the business, I'm involved in every conceivable aspect of what we do, things that I never would have dreamt about being involved with when I was an outside lawyer. Because when you get a call as an outside
business
lawyer,
side of it, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So I've thought more, my evolution as a business person over the last 6 years has, if you were looking at a growth curve, it was incremental and it was really kind of case specific. Now it's like, straight up and down, because every single day I'm exposed to things, just like the financials of a public company reporting. That is something that our CFO and I've learned so much about over the last 18 months. And it's things I never even thought about before. So to me, those are the two big pros. You learn more about business, like true business, and you have a much better day-to-day knowledge of your client.
Well, and I think it's also, you're having a more sort of stable work-life balance, in the sense that there aren't, fires to put out every weekend or fires to put out every evening. You're not getting, your phone isn't just ringing off the hook. You're not dealing with hundreds of emails from dozens of different people. Yeah. Right. So, I mean, I think that's part of what the beautiful part of it is that idea that, hey, I'm not going to have the same stress that I have in a private practice. So, again, pros and cons on both sides. What I really wanted to get to, and we only have a few minutes, Matt, I'm really kind of disappointed, because I wanted to spend a good 5-8 minutes on this and we don't have it. So we're going to have to be very precise in how we handle this question. There are lawyers that are in private practice that really want to work with companies and have to get to the companies through general counsels. As a GC, someone that's worked on the private side, what's the best approach for a lawyer who wants to work with Infusion to court you, to talk with you, to engage you, and try to figure out where there might be synergy?
What I found most effective, Steve, is, since moving in-house and definitely since becoming GC a little bit over a year and a half ago, I get emails, phone calls constantly. And a lot of them are, here's why we're great. And it's just kind of, that's the start, that's the beginning and the ending of it. Here's why we're great. Here's my firm. Here's our reputation. Here's what I can do. And that's great. Like, look, there are many, many capable lawyers out there. The conversations and the approach that I have found that I personally react best to are those where people come to me not about why they're great or what they can do, but where they're like, hey, I spent some time understanding your company, and we're public, right? Our 10Ks, 10Qs are out there in the world. You can get on our website and understand our business. Where they come to me and they say, hey, I spent some time understanding your business, the industry you're in, the market, the sorts of issues that you're probably dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And immediately it opens in my mind, hey, here's an opportunity to like have a conversation that's not just like, I'm great, here's why you should hire me. It's a conversation about, here's why I'm the right lawyer for your company. And here's why, what I can do to help ease your pain. Because to me, at the end of the day, the best lawyers that I've worked with, and those lawyers that have had the most, let's say, success, like, being that first phone call for me, are the ones that are like reading my mind. Right. And they may see something in the news about my company and they may send me an email and say, hey, we saw this. I'm assuming you have it under control, but to the extent you want to have a conversation, let me know. And to me, that's like, they're lightening my load. Those are the best outside lawyers. Right. Yeah. Like, and so, and I always, and this is something that I learned pretty quickly when I came in-house, is as an outside lawyer, when I would get a phone call from a GC or a CEO, I would think, oh, this must be the most important thing going on in their world right now. They've gotten sued or they need to sue someone. That could not be further from the truth. Now, if it's a bet the company lawsuit, probably it's keeping them up at night. But for me, when I get on a phone with an outside lawyer for 15 minutes on a Thursday afternoon at 2:00, it's like one of 50 things that I'm navigating in that moment. And my goal is to take that baton and hand it to them. And hopefully in a day or 2 or 4, they come back to me and hand it back. And the idea of how we proceed or how we deal with something is much clearer, right? I've handed this to them. When they hand it back, it's better. And so, yeah, to your question, I think the outside lawyers that really meet GCs or CEOs kind of where they live versus just saying, hey, look at my pedigree and look at what law school I went to and look at this big firm I go to. There's those sorts of lawyers, in my opinion, are not everywhere, but there's a lot of them. How do you distinguish yourself? And I think it's by showing your prospective client, hey, I've spent some time getting to know your business, and here's how I think I can be valuable to you.
And I think the other thing that's important is, where is this lawyer coming from? Are they soliciting you straight up out of nowhere? Are they being brought to you through a trusted advisor, through, a law firm you're already working with, or another consultant that you're working with, or, some other element, or maybe it's someone that you know from law school that you've kept in touch with, and, they're thinking, hey, there might be something here. But there's a relationship that either, is developed or through inherited trust through someone that right? It's probably not someone that's just cold calling you out of nowhere.
It's rare that it's a cold call. Yeah. And the only time I would really say that I've that's been a path is when, like, hey, they happen to be the only lawyer that ever reached out to me on this very narrow issue, and I just happen to have that narrow issue. But you think about the numbers game there, it's such a low probability. Yeah. It's usually somebody I've worked with who I respect immensely, someone who I went to law school with, who we've stayed in touch, and I know what their capabilities are. And I would say that's probably half of it. The other half of the time, it's usually, hey, somebody that I work with is like, hey, I came from this place, and this is a firm that I know, and I trust them, and they've got the best group that does X. And so it's, to your point, it's kind of a transferred credibility, where somebody I trusts them, and they make an introduction and we have a conversation. But I'd say both. I mean, sometimes it's just personal relationships where at the end of the day, Steve, like, either I need to trust this person to help, or somebody I trust needs to trust them. That's the biggest thing here. Yeah. And trust is not something you just turn on. It's earned. But
we're hitting, trust. We're hitting, find your stressors. We're not every law firm that you're dishing business and work out to, you're a 10 out of 10 happy with, right? I mean, there's some that you might be, there's others that might be middle of the road that are replaceable if you were to find a better fit. It's just a matter of which business developer can develop the relationship, the trust, and get in there, find your stressors, and take the door that might be open a crack and swing it open a foot. And that isn't most attorneys that are willing to put themselves out there to go after the general counsel. And I'm training them every day to do that in a similar fashion than we're talking about. And they just think, oh, well, they already have counsel, they wouldn't want to talk to me. No, not the case. I think you have to try.
Yeah. And to your point, and you're absolutely right. Like, there are multiple firms that we use. Some, I don't know that I could ever live without them. There are others where they're getting the job done, but in my mind, there may be a better value fit from another firm. Yeah. And so, one of the things I've seen done with great success, both with me and people I know that are GCs and decision makers at other companies, is, to your point, there's a crack in the door. You get your foot in the door and you say, hey, how can I help? Like, let me show you what we've got. And look, and sometimes it's like, hey, we're going to do this without cost or at a significant discount. And it's like, hey, let me give you a proof of concept about why we're a good fit. And then, you revisit that 6 months later. And so absolutely. But to your point, I think the first step from a law firm perspective is you just got to try. Yeah. And I think, when I was a law firm attorney early on, before I had the benefit of like kind of seeing what would work, and before you and I had a chance to work together years ago, I just kind of thought like, hey, you just like take people to dinner or take them to a Cubs game, and it's like, that's just magically business appears. There's so much more there. It's relationship building. It's understanding. It's putting yourself in the headspace of those decision makers and thinking, what do they prioritize? And look, another GC might prioritize totally different things than me. And we all have different factors, right? Sometimes it's economics, sometimes it's trust, sometimes it's what's the type of business, what are my internal capabilities? But I think it's just getting to know who you're selling to, and then really being deliberate about how you communicate with them and demonstrating your value proposition, not just as a lawyer, but for that specific business.
Yeah. Well, spot on, my friend. Thanks so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. We've got maybe 30 seconds on our game-changing book, Upstream. Can you talk a little bit about, I've not heard of that.
Yeah, we can bookend it with with the Benjamin Franklin quote, prevention versus, cure, right? Upstream is a book that my team and I read this year. It has really colored our perspective on how we want to proceed through 2024 as a legal department. And the whole idea is, how do we get ahead of these repeated issues we're experiencing pain on and prevent them? And so the entire book, I would recommend it to anyone, lawyers. It's not a book about lawyers or the law. It's just about problem solving. Healthcare is one of them, home maintenance, educational issues where school systems are failing. But the concept is the same. And the thread that runs through all of it is being proactive and being thoughtful up front. Even though you're not going to have the parade that a firefighter gets, installing sprinklers, there's actually intrinsically more value in doing that because it's the problem. I say this always, the best problem is one you never have. And so proactive upstream thinking to me is the most consistent way to avoid those problems in the first place.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate you coming on the show. As we wrap up, I want to thank our sponsors, of course, Green Cardigan Marketing, Lawmatics, and Get Staffed Up, all great friends of the show. And Matt, thanks, man. I appreciate this. This is a new perspective that we're sharing today that I don't think I'd had in 400 episodes. So, I think it's really impactful for people to hear the pros and cons of the in-house versus private. And then, that they shouldn't be afraid to go after the GCs in the softest possible way to develop trust and understand them at a high level and try to get that business. And I think shedding some light on that was super helpful.
Well, I was happy to be here, Steve. Thanks again for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And thank you, everybody, for spending time with Matt and I today on the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. Take care, everybody. Be safe, be well. We will talk again soon.